James, do you remember a time where you were the most lonely or felt the most lonely?
Yes, I do. It was probably the lowest point of my life up until that point. So, to set the scene, I just moved to Brisbane. It was October of 2022, and I thought I had the job that was going to take me so far into my career. And I remember living in this apartment in Brisbane that didn't really meet the standards that I thought it was going to with my partner at the time. And I remember she was at work, and I had just gone to a very stressful period where we had just moved. I had to start the job, and within my first week of moving, I had to go to Darwin. I fell really sick in Darwin, came back, and there were boxes everywhere. I had no one in Brisbane, it was only her. And I remember I get a call one day with my boss, and they let me know that the job wasn't working out, and I actually got let go that day. And I remember hanging up on the call, and I looked around in my office and I saw my reflection in the mirror, and I just broke down. I remember it was probably the lowest point of my entire life. And I remember thinking, I've just got this brand new job. I've wanted to move to Brisbane so bad. I've been here for less than a week, and this is the first thing that's happened. I know absolutely no one. I have no family to call back on. My girlfriend's at work. I had no idea what to do. I remember just looking around at these boxes thinking, I've just made the biggest mistake of my entire life. And the first person I called was my girlfriend, and I let her know the situation. She said to me, everything's going to be okay. When we get home, we'll sort it out. And then I
Mm,
actually remember the second person I called was you. And
mm.
I said to you, this has just happened. Like, I can't believe it. I don't know what I'm going to do. And you settled me. And you said very similar things to my girlfriend at the time. And looking back on that moment of my life, that's probably been the point where I've actually gone from strength to strength, because I was at rock bottom. And as they say, the only way is up. So
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of self development and a lot of hustling to, really put myself out there, find a new job, make connections, all of that. But to do it within the first week of being in a brand new city, that was the loneliest I've ever felt in my entire life.
Yeah. And I think you're completely not alone in that because a lot of people, especially within the Gen Z kind of cohort, are feeling this. And something and a theme that we're seeing come up a lot is that we are becoming the loneliest generation, which is a great way to, I guess, start what we want to talk about today and talk about deep dive in why we're the most loneliness, what's the causes of it, is there anything that is working? And I know you deep dive and did a little bit of some stats. So do you want to share anything on that?
So while I was doing some research, it was quite a fascinating topic. So just to pull up some of my notes to make sure I'm recording accurate data. So based on a survey conducted with 17,000 people as its sample size, 47% of people say they have many friends. 35% of people say that they don't have many friends, and 23% are neutral.
Mm,
And what we're seeing over a period of time is from 2001 to current day in 2026, there's been a steady decline of the amounted reported friends people are claiming that they have. So, what is really interesting is looking at the data. I could assume that between the period of 2019 and 2021 or 2022, which is the pandemic affected years, that would probably be when most people said that they didn't have many friends. But
yeah.
according to the research and from the stats that I was able to identify, that's been declining every single year since 2001. So, what's interesting is, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it more in today's episode, is there a linkage between the increase in technology and the decrease in friendships? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when I was kind of looking at this and then reflecting on my own life, for me, there's probably three or top three causes of loneliness. Number one, which you just spoke to, was COVID. I think that post COVID, we haven't really come out of what the effects were on communication, socialization, etc. And when we think about it, Gen Zs who were locked down during COVID, those are your prime years where you do learn, where you do grow, where you do make friends. And so that hindered our growth completely in this area, right? Another one for me is social media. We have completely grown up on technology. We rely on technology. And I think without a social media platform, Gen Z have this sense of FOMO or feeling untouched or out of touch, rather. So I think that for me is number two. Number three is the cost of living crisis that we are in. And the reason I say that is because when we are hanging out with people, the pressure is that we're going out for dinner or you're getting a drink or you're doing something that revolves around money. And with how much things cost, like even just a cup of coffee or a basic meal, it tends to get really expensive then to go out and put yourself out there because you can't even afford to do that.
So to summarize your 3 points, so point one is COVID post pandemic, and that actually aligns with some of the research I've looked at as well. Point number two being social media, and point number three, cost of living. All really key points that we're going to dive deeper into this episode. But just touching on point one, what's really interesting about the pandemic is most young adults experienced the adulthood during peak pandemic. So, what that actually means is this key period of growth in your life where you're meant to be socializing and experiencing everything that your young adult life has to offer was just either frozen or stopped completely because of the pandemic. So, what we're seeing since the pandemic, which is 2022 onwards, that period of growth hasn't really recovered. So I was actually watching a documentary, and this person was based in Britain. And it was a young male, same age as us, 25, who experienced the pandemic in their early 20s. And they felt like as they started a career and went about doing things via Zoom, that transition to the office left them feeling like they were unable to actually hold a conversation or create a conversation. And it might sound silly when you're hearing us talk about this, but that kind of related to how I was feeling a little bit post pandemic as well, because I was so comfortable in my four walls that
Mm,
going outside of it was really unknown territory.
yeah.
And I don't like using the pandemic as an excuse because there are ways that you can, go about improving yourself and improving your communication skills and overall doing what you need to meet new people. But that section where you almost forget how to hold a conversation is really key. And I think it kind of touches on to what you mentioned with social media, having this over reliance on it where you can just have a conversation and it can maybe last a couple text messages, 15 minutes total, and then that's it, conversation's done. So after you have that conversation in real life, are you actually going below the surface level? Do you actually want to know someone on a deeper level? It's interesting.
And I think the flow and effect from COVID, so something that I've noticed in my workplace, especially post COVID, that job that I was in then, we were expected to come back to the office 5 days a week, right? Which was fine. That was what we were used to pre COVID. Then when I moved into state, the job that I went into, it was 3 days at home, 2 days in the office. And I remember my first kind of week there, my boss at the time, she said to me, okay, so tomorrow you can go home. And as a starter, I thought to myself, what am I going to do at home? I have no idea what's happening. How am I going to connect with people? Post 4 years now being in this same job, I love it. I love working from home. My partner is 5 days in the office. And sometimes when I complain about going into the office, he just can't relate to me. And he always says, oh, what do you mean? That's normal. Which is funny that to me, it's not the new normal. And I think for a lot of people, it's not. When we are looking for jobs, we look at what is the flexibility? Is there a hybrid work approach? Something that we've also lost is the Fridays. So my office doesn't go in on the Fridays. And that is when a lot of these workplaces would clock off a little bit earlier and do those work drinks or post work drinks. And for those people, post 5 p.m., post 3 p.m. on a Friday, that's when you start talking about yourself outside of work because you're done. You're about to go into your weekend. It's different to when you're sitting at work at lunchtime or even at 5 p.m. or going for a coffee during work hours because you're still in that work mood, in my opinion. So I think losing that Friday night drinks really affected us because that's when you learn who your colleagues are. You learn who their kids are and their names and that they're playing soccer and footy and how old they are, and they learn about you and your life and where you live and your family. And then the next week you come into work and you say, oh, how was, your kids footy on the weekend, did they win, etc. And so I think we've completely lost that, and we've lost how to have small talk. Or sorry, we know now how to make small talk, but we don't know how to go beyond that. So all we ask is, hey, how are you? Good, thanks. How are you? And move on. We're forgetting to ask things about, like, what excites you, what's happening in life, what did you do in your weekend, but go into detail. I don't want to hear that you meal plan for the 5th weekend in a row. What else is happening? There's a little bit on our sense that we probably need to take ownership on, for this loneliness thing, and basically say, how do we own it again? Because even now we've been told that we are mandatory asked to come in on Mondays and do Monday plus 2 more days. And it's funny just seeing everyone's reaction to it. It's people are complaining, people are saying, oh my God, I don't want to come in on Monday. I'm going to take the piss a little bit until I need to because I know I'm going to have to come in. And people are treating Mondays or Fridays as this almost mini extension of your weekend. So it really has created a bit of this laziness from us, even, and created loneliness even more. And I don't know if you see that in your workplace, because I know you do a little bit of hybrid work as well.
Yeah, I do. One thing that I find myself craving is, since moving into state where you don't have your friends and family, I'm craving that connection a lot more because it's so much harder for me to actually get it. So, one thing I've identified is for those people who maybe have a core group of friends and family base in the city where I'm living, they don't feel like they have to work as hard to create that connection and keep it up. Whereas for
Yeah.
me, I'm working that extra bit harder, that extra 1%, 2% to, carry on the conversation or have that conversation outside of work hours or try and dig a little bit below the surface to know that person on a deeper level. As you said with the meal prep example, when I'm asking someone, what did you do on the weekend or what do you like to do? I don't want that surface level answer. I actually am asking because I want you to tell me. Maybe there's something that we can connect with, or a shared experience that we can discuss together, or a
Yeah.
shared hobby that we can talk about, or maybe even do. So
Yeah.
that's a period of my own personal growth that I've learned from moving interstate. And admittedly, I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it has been. I'm sure you can relate to some of the experiences that we're sharing today. But for me personally, I thought you would get a job, you would make friends from your job, do those after work drinks that you're talking about, which, as you mentioned, don't really happen as much anymore, which was a shock because you start before COVID and it's common, you have COVID and now it's not. And the other thing is, I thought you would just join a social sport and make friends from that, but that hasn't really happened in my own experience. So it's tricky. The question that I want to pose to you is, when you move out of school and you move out of university, you move out of your city where you're from, where do you go to form new connections?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I was looking and researching a little bit about how do you even make friends, because I'm sure people listening will be saying to us, great, that's all well and good to highlight the issue, but what can we do to help? And something they found was that proximity and persistency, so constantly seeing that person or the people around you, is the one factor of how you make friends. And this is why a lot of the people you'll meet are still maybe friends with a lot of the people they went to school with, because that is the crux of where you meet friends. It's school life, it's uni life, because you're constantly around these people and you constantly have to show up to class. It's when you start getting into those older years where, one, you're an adult, you're at a certain stage of your life, and you start to beginning to have standards because you know what you want from yourself, you know what you can give to a friendship, and that's what you equally expect from someone else. So this is why I think it starts to get harder, because we put these standards in, which I think is still really important. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that, but then what other common grounds do you have if you're not playing a sport on the outside? If you aren't studying or going to school, if you don't have friends or people that want to introduce you to new people, and another thing I've noticed is this is why we have friends that are from work, or why a lot of the people, when you introduce someone to someone, you go, oh, yeah, we work together at some point in life, because that's your only connection point now. It's only where you work. So it's funny because there's a little bit of this barrier at work, but it's those 1%ers at work where you can break that barrier, where I feel like those are the connections you have after. But yeah, I think it's incredibly hard unless you're putting yourself out there and doing things. And I know something you've tried to do is social sport. I know you've had maybe a bit of hit and misses, but maybe some positive experiences with that. Do you want to chat us through how social sports worked out for you?
Yeah, definitely. So, before going into my own experience, I would definitely encourage any listener out there to identify what your hobbies are and use technology as your advantage. So, for me, I just moved to Brisbane and I knew I wanted to play a social sport. And through high school, I played a little bit of touch footy. So, I thought, perfect. I joined a Facebook group looking for people to play touch football with. Joined that group, put a message out. Somebody reached out to me and said, I'm looking to form a team if you're interested. It's going to be mixed and it's on this night, and you don't really need too much experience. It's just going to be more for fun. So I read that and I thought, great, this is going to be the easiest way to make friends. Little did I know two things. Showing up to that first day, I was so nervous. I remember driving in my car. Before I left, I Googled where I actually needed to park because I was that stressed. Drove there in the dark because it was like 8 o'clock at night or something for my first game. I remember parking the car and looking down onto the oval and seeing all these people play touch footy, and just this overwhelming anxiety flooded over me. And I just remember thinking, I don't even know what these people look like. I don't even know how to play. What the hell am I doing right now? So I remember walking to the field. I had the field number and just asking all these random people, are you such and such? Are you such and such? Until I found the people that were in my team. And from there, I showed up week on week. But the issue I identified with social sport was because it is social, people aren't committed to come all the time. So there were a lot of instances where we were short on numbers and it just wasn't really a fun experience because you're playing with no reserves, you're absolutely gassed. People start getting overly competitive in like a C grade division. Didn't really
Mm.
work out. But that's just one example, and I would encourage people like what I've done, don't stop there. So the other thing I identified was, all right, I really like going to the gym. At that point, I was with Anytime Fitness, so I thought maybe I should join a group gym. That's probably a good way to meet people. So I joined a boxing gym. I'd never done boxing in my entire life. Didn't even know if I was going to like it. Turns out it was some of the best moments I've ever had. You're in these classes and you're training with people, and it's just this collective intensity where once you finish the workout, you're going and you're high fiving and you're just thinking, like, yes, we got through that together. You start showing up at the same time, they start showing up at the same time with you, and you just naturally form and have these conversations. Then I moved from where I was living, joined another gym, which is a strength and conditioning gym, so no longer boxing. And that's been great as well. And basically, what I'm trying to get at is when you identify what you enjoy, you're more likely to find people who are of the same interest and working towards the same goals as you. Struggle that I found was I was doing other social sports outside of touch footy that I was doing just for the sake of making friends, but I wasn't enjoying them. So another example is I did a 6 week basketball comp and I hated it. I just remember doing it because I wanted to make friends, but I didn't even enjoy what I was doing. So I thought, what is the point of this? Why am I wasting my time? So more recently, I transitioned to playing to tennis because I thought I don't need any other people. As long as I've got a racket and there's one other person on the court, I can play. So for me, moving from touch footy to basketball to eventually tennis has been the best thing I found in my experience.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important to continue to try, like you said. One thing that you did talk on was social anxiety just then. And I think that this is what comes down to the crux sometimes of loneliness, right? Is feeling socially anxious. And this is something that I feel like I hear people just throw it around. They're like, oh, I'm too socially anxious, or oh, that's gonna hike my social anxiety. So I thought to myself, because I knew we were going to record this, let me actually look up what the term social anxiety means.
Okay.
Because what is this? Are we just saying something? Because we know Gen Zs, they love to coin something. We're guilty of it too. So when I looked it up, it said it's this intensive fear of being judged, watched, or humiliated persistently. I want to ask you this. Do you feel as though the way we're using the term social anxiety, how we talk about loneliness, is what I just said, the definition is?
No, because I think you build it up more in your own mind.
Right? So when I then looked into it, I said, it's actually more this phobia of socializing. We're not socially anxious. We don't have social anxiety. I think we're just scared of being in social situations. We're scared of being vulnerable. We're scared of rejection. So I'm wondering if we need to rework this narrative and really call it for what it is and not the fact that it's socially anxiety. And don't get me wrong, there is probably people who do feel socially anxious and have social anxiety. But I just calling myself out here, I use that term like it is, but I'm not socially anxious. I'm just got this phobia of, oh my God, I have to put my energy in. What percentage am I charged to today? Can I give it that much? And so I think it's funny because then I think about times where I get asked to do things. Something that I got really lucky with was this one friend that I had, and I, look back and almost regret not taking advantage, but she would always want to invite me to certain things and where I didn't know people. And I'd always go, oh no, like all good, and make some sort of excuse like, oh, thanks, that sounds so good. I've got this thing on. And the relief I felt from not going or canceling is just crazy because then we go back to saying, oh, but I feel so lonely and I feel like I don't have plans or I don't have anyone. But why do we have this relief in canceling and not going and rather just staying at home? And I don't know, I think I know we're quite different when it comes to these things. So I don't know if you feel similar or on the opposite end of the spectrum where you're like, yeah, what the hell's wrong with you? Why would you do that?
Yeah, I think it's normal to naturally feel anxious or scared of a situation that's unknown to you, right? You look on social media all the time, and it's so common to hear somebody say, you grow when you're uncomfortable, which
Mm.
the essence of that is so true. It's not until I've put myself out there and into new situations and experiences since moving to Brisbane that I've actually realized, okay, that is also true. You are putting it in your head, and meeting that expectation versus reality are two separate things. So, as a perfect example, I've done so many new sports, met new people through whatever social situation that I feel really comfortable being in them now. So, yesterday, I reached out to a Facebook group earlier in the week, and I wanted to play tennis on the weekends. Someone got back to me and said, "Hey, we run a social comp on Saturdays. If you're keen, come down." So that's what I did. And I remember rocking up, and when I relate to the first time I played touch footy, sitting in the car park being so nervous, yesterday
Mhm.
I was full of confidence and excitement. I wanted to play tennis. I wanted to be there. I didn't know a single person. I'm not even that good at tennis. But I just knew I liked playing tennis. I'm so comfortable meeting new people that when I got out of the car and went into the clubhouse, hey, how you going? My name's James. I'm here for the social tennis day. Do you know who my teammate is? How does this format work? Everyone was so welcoming. Everyone was so happy to just be there themselves and introduce themselves to me. It was probably the best day I've had in so long.
Oh, it's
So
so good.
I encourage any listener out there who may be feeling like they are a little bit lonely or they're a little bit anxious. It's scary to do it initially, but when you do it so often and put yourself out there into new situations, you do become comfortable in the uncomfortable, and you'll actually be
Mm.
surprised at how much you'll grow.
Yeah, it's so nice to hear you say that because I know I've been on this journey with you on social sports and putting yourself out there and how difficult it's been. So it's so nice to hear that it was a really great outcome yesterday. I think as well to your point on expectations and what the reality is of things, something I want to bring to people's attention is let's just take a step back from what we see on TV shows, what we read in books, what we see in movies, especially within female friendships. I mean, I'm sure you can speak to more male friendships, but when I see some of these TV shows or movies, obviously the friendships you see are incredible, but they are talking 24/7 in group chats. They're calling each other all the time. They're hanging out constantly. But we don't that's not real. That's not the reality of it. Maybe it was during that period in time when you were at uni and you had the free time. But when we're the most of and majority of us are working a 9 to 5, have to then, some of us have families, then we have to cook and make meals. We then have to be healthy and do something on the side. Some of us have relationships, so then, 5% of our time goes there in a day. We don't have time then to constantly be calling and texting and hanging out with this best friend or group of best friends constantly. And the reality is, you probably see these people once a month or once every 2 months, and that's still okay. And you still have a network and you still have people. And in fact, I would love for you to see in situations where, you do need a little bit of extra help and you reach out to that community. You'll be pleasantly surprised at how many people within that group that you might only see once a month or every 2 months actually do come to your aid and are there and go above and beyond. So I think we need to just realize that what we see online as well, it's not always real. And we don't know what's actually happening to these people when the cameras are turned off. And it's so easy to write the narratives of what happens in movies and TV shows because you want the viewer to feel good. That's kind of my thoughts there. And I don't know if you've got anything on um, male friendships.
Yeah, I think you make a really interesting point about how females go about socializing and what their friendship groups actually look like. I have some stats that sort of back up different age patterns and what we're seeing. So, no surprise, 15-year-olds have the most friends. And that obviously makes sense because when you're at school, you're surrounded by the same group of people. And that touches on to what you've already mentioned, where when you're hanging out with people all the time and you're at the same place, you're naturally going to form connections. But what we're seeing the difference between males and females is males experience the lowest friendship levels in their late 40s to 50s, and then it grows again. So, what we can see from those stats is when you retire as a male, you're more likely to make more friends. I am obviously just inferring that. I don't know if that's what the data tells us, but
Mhm.
females, on the other hand, females experience the lowest point between the ages of 25 and 30 and then seem to increase all the way up until their 70s. I obviously don't want to make any assumptions from a female perspective. I can make assumptions from a male perspective because I imagine when you retire, that's where we see a lot of males going into their hobbies. So a lot of them will go and do golf or they'll go and do some sort of stuff with the vintage car or bowls, whatever it may be. What do you think could be the reason for females that after the age of 30 to 70, they're seeing the largest friendship group increase?
I think it's probably that coming of age piece where we have a lot of friends, or you're surrounded by all these people when you're younger. And then it's that middle, like 20s, right? They call it frontal lobe develops. And like I said prior, it's the standards thing. You're going into this time of relationships, and something we see is a lot of women who do get into relationships tend to put a lot of emphasis on that. So then they're no longer available to their friends. And so maybe it's this piece of that next phase of life, or and if we look at it as phase one, school, right? Friendships, those are your people. Phase two, you either keep a few of those, you kind of lose a couple of them. You come into this new point where whether you get new ones that are aligned to that phase of your life. So, we all go through changes. We want different things, we want better things. And then this third phase, we've worked on ourselves enough that we now have time again to put it into these friendships and relationships. And that's, I guess, what I put it down to. And then thinking about that age group being sometimes the age group that also have kids, and then kids have friends. So then is it mothers as well in those groups who then come together because of that? And that's, again, another new common ground that's different to those other age groups. I think that would be what it is for me. But I don't know, do you have a hypothesis as a male? Like, I'm keen to hear what you guys see and observe. And another question on the back of that is, what do you think are, if you were saying the top three things that women have in common to socialize? And I think you could see this from your partner as well. When she goes and makes a friend, what are the things that they talk about from a male's perspective?
Feel like you're trying to get me in trouble here with my
No,
answer.
I'm just curious because I'm curious from a male's perspective because I hear my partner have all these close friends. I'm like, okay, what do you talk about? And
Well,
he's like, nothing, we're just content. And I'm like, what?
yeah. See, this is one thing that I've probably found the most challenging is when you compare a group of male friends that you've had for so long, you have inside jokes and references, experiences, and stories that you constantly draw from, and you just laugh and have a good time and you're comfortable. I've experienced that making new groups of male friends, unless that develops over time, initially it's harder to form that connection. And it kind of goes back to what we've been saying, where the friends that you've had at school are usually the ones that you will continue to have throughout your whole life because your core developmental experiences are carried through. But when I think about what my partner discusses with her friends, they seem to have deeper conversations with a lot more substance, which is great. And then, similar to what your partner said, when you're with the boys, sometimes you don't want to talk about things below the surface.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's a caveat. That can be a whole other conversation. But sometimes you just want to have a laugh. You want to forget about things that may be happening at work, or maybe you're feeling stressed and you just feel like talking about the footy or any other social or interest that you have is just the thing you need to fill your cup. So that's sort of the analysis I can identify.
I would love to leave the listener with, especially someone who maybe finds it a bit hard to make friends, maybe three things from each of our opinion when you're socializing with the same kind of like demographic. So me, females to females, you males to males, on maybe three things that they think are the easy or we think are the easiest things, and by no means are we experts in making friends, but just to help push someone. So from my experience from a female's perspective, I think this one's going to be very easy and funny, is boys. I think that's the number one thing that girls can have in common, because everyone loves hearing about someone else's love life and giving unsolicited advice. And that's not a negative, but we love hearing about it. We love hyping up the girls with it. We always get super excited about it. So I think that for me is like number one. Number two common ground is TV show, reality TV show. Every time I hear someone say, I've watched The Real Housewives of, the amount of like eyes and heads that dart to that one person, and they're like, which one is it? Is it New York? Is it Beverly Hills? Which one? Which character do you like? So I think it's reality, or even just, you know, Bridgerton and the like, those kind of shows. And then the last thing, which I think is really obvious, and these three things sound really cliche, but I will say it is when you're trying to get in from a surface level perspective. As soon as you get in one of these avenues, I think you can then ask them about what their trauma is right after. But I think it actually just is general interest, like what brands of hair, care, makeup, where's their shirt from? Because us girls are very in tune with the trends and the brands and the drama online with celebrities and influencers. So for me, and as much as it is cliche, I think if I had to see and standing next to someone and I had to just say one thing and I had nothing to say, it would be complimenting something that they're wearing and ask where they got it from, and then you go down that track. But I'm sure it's completely different for males. So do you have like a top three that you would use for males?
Hearing that just makes me laugh, and I love that this is the dynamic we're going to have on this podcast, because we want that male and female
Yeah.
introspective and perspective. So you've just delivered that, because those 3 points are the complete opposite to everything I was thinking about, to be completely honest. um, you really put me on the spot with three. Off the top of my
Okay.
head, the first thing I would say is, in my experience, I love chatting to someone about the footy, whether it's NRL, which is my main love, or AFL secondary. If anyone watches NRL and AFL, immediately I can form a conversational thread from there, and then that conversation goes somewhere else eventually. But
Mm.
having that common ground of something you're both interested in and watching in, great platform to start. Because you go, did you see the footy last night? Yeah, what's your team? My team's XYZ. Hate that team. My team's this team. Go on from there. Second thing is probably more advice, sticking at it. Because I feel like with blokes, it takes a little bit longer to know someone below the surface and actually have that strong connection.
Mhm.
So just keep showing up, having that conversation, talking about things that you may be both interested in, and seeing where it goes from there, and being patient. The third thing is finding a common ground to where your interests lie. You're more likely to meet someone with common interests if you're actually going out and pursuing those interests yourself. So, perfect example, I like footy, so maybe go to a sports bar. It sounds weird telling someone to go and do something by yourself, but after experiencing it, it's such an incredible experience to actually go and do, because people, you probably think someone's going to judge you, but people are actually happy to talk, because I think everybody's craving this connection. So I actually have gone to a sports bar by myself because I didn't know anyone in Brisbane, and I've had an awesome time, because Magic Round happened in Brisbane. I wanted to go to Magic Round. My friend didn't want to go that year. I went up to the Caxton Street and I saw other people in Canberra Raiders jerseys. So for the listeners, that's my team. And instantly, bang, you got something to talk about, because you see someone in the jersey or the hat, and you're at a rugby league event. So you're talking about the footy, and I'm getting excited talking about it. It was just so good. So
I love that. And I actually have a very similar instance of Billie Eilish was in town. I don't have many friends that like her like I do. I really wanted to go and I would have been so upset if I missed it. And I just bought a ticket by myself. And to be honest, I think a concert or a movie, and to your point, even footy and sport is a great first step, because the point of going to those things is to watch something else. So you're not going to feel as scared as you think, because everyone else is watching, and you'll be surprised at how many people come to these events alone. So when I showed up, I actually was sat next to someone else who bought a single ticket, and then we ended up realizing that we both bought solo tickets, that we just talked for a little bit at the start, enjoyed our own time there. And then I remember at the end, I mean, I'm a big Billie Eilish fan, so I was crying towards the end. And she just started like rubbing my back and soothing me. And it was a very great girl moment of just being there together. And don't know. I think if I was to like help for future, I could have asked for her details or something. I didn't in the moment, and looking back, could have been a really great story to tell on how we met. But these are the instances that constantly happen where people are already doing it. And to your point, people are scared, but sometimes you just have to be the person that does it. And I hate to say it because we all go, yeah, but why do I have to do it? I mean, if you are the person that doesn't want to be lonely anymore, if you are the person that wants to create friends, be that person. Connect that one person you meet from group A and group B and bring them together, and create this whole group as well. I think it starts with each person, so don't be afraid to go down that. One thing I would love to chat through, because we haven't really touched on it too much, is loneliness and the correlation with social media. Because we live and we talk about loneliness and not feeling connected. Yet, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that go, well, what do you mean? I am connected. I'm online constantly. I scroll. I know what's trending. I know what the new news is. And not to put you on the spot, but do you have any thoughts on the correlation between feeling lonely, connected online, and what that's doing for real intimacy, not just relationship wise, but just friendship wise?
I think it's caused a lot of complacency because when you do feel so connected online, picture this. You have a friend that you see post regularly on Instagram, and when they post, they have regular life updates. So you might know whether they're traveling overseas, in a relationship, in a new city, whatever it may be. You might know every single thing that's happened to their life within the last 2 years. But when was the last time you actually spoke to that person? So I think this is where the complacency in being connected so often and so chronically online is causing a correlation with these problems and these feelings of loneliness, because it's artificial connection. You're not actually speaking with this person and you feel like, well, okay, I might send such and such a message and see how they're going and they might respond to me. But if you're in the same city as them, why aren't you going and catching up in real life? And maybe you do, but are you doing it as frequently? I've got some stats on this, and when people are feeling like they don't have many friends, 38% of those people are saying that they socialize less than monthly. 47% are saying that they want more frequent visits. 34% are saying that they have no one to confide in. 40% are saying they have no one to cheer them up. 40% again are feeling lonely, and 37% claim to have poor mental health. So I would pose the question to you, our listener. When was the last time you actually caught up with your friends in real life, your core close group of friends? And when you did catch up with them, how did you feel?
Yeah, I love this. I think, adding to your point, it's funny because we see intimacy and connection through comments, through likes, through reshares. You see a lot of these conversations that happen online. They're not real back and forth conversations. They're back and forth of reels. They're back and forth of videos of sharing. And maybe that's how you feel connected. But then what I'd love to argue is, okay, put your phone down for a second. And something that I've seen trending, which I really love, is that contentness of just sitting in nothing.
Mm.
We're so online, we think we're so connected, but it doesn't equal real intimacy in my opinion. When you put the phone down, you have this fear of missing out. This construct of, what am I missing? I need to quickly, I want people to go through their phone. There's this like feature we can see how many times you've picked your phone up. How many times have you picked it up, but there's been no real notification? There's no reason to check your phone. It's just because it's now this second nature and this habit that we're picking up of constantly having to feel like we need to be online and know everything. I don't know if I've told you this, but I actually deleted TikTok and I deleted Instagram temporarily. Still off TikTok, and I've just recently got Instagram back, and more just for this. And it's funny being and hearing people talk about things that are trending and me going, wait, what? And at first, it was uncomfortable because you want to be part of these conversations. You want to know what's happening. You want to feel like you know what's going on. And then after, all I would say is, oh, what's the trend? People would explain it to me and would move on. And that's it. And I think there's actually a really nice sense of feeling disconnected from social media that ironically makes you feel more connected to people. Because now we've sat in this conversation for 5 to 10 minutes of them trying to explain this trend and us laughing and, them feeling like we can go into a deeper conversation about it. And probably not the best example of how you connect with someone, but I think it's really interesting to see that. I also want to say, contrary to all of this, there are certain groups within our society that I do think that online communities are really important and a little bit of a safety net to them. Let's bring up the movement and the community of LGBT. I know that that's a really hard group within just society itself. And I'm sure there's so many platforms and communities and groups that they have online where they feel the safest and they can turn to. I know people like my partner's a big gamer and he has all these online friends that he's not really ever met or met one time because he happened to be in their hometown. But they sound like really great friends and sounds like a really great connection point. I hear him laugh all the time. And so I do think that this points to the argument where maybe online connections are good when it is an outlet for people who maybe get bullied and ostracized and they need to turn to someone. People who have hobbies that are really unique and the people in your life might not share that with you. How do you turn to that online community where people are more interested in that? So I think social media has done a really good job in making us feel like we need it and maybe almost causing this disconnect a little bit. But I think there's nuances to it where there's certain groups that maybe rely on it. And I think it is a good safety net.
Yeah, I think it's something where you use technology to make it work for you instead of over relying on it too much, which is what we've discussed in this conversation. When you talk about your partner having online friends and maybe to you it sounds like he's known them forever and he's laughing and hasn't even seen them in real life, I can relate to that too. But it goes down to the shared experience where you're having a common interest with a shared experience and you just naturally form connections. I think the difference is where you balance it with real life, because when we talk to the statistics that we've shared on this episode so far, that's talking about the real life connection and the real life feelings of loneliness. But on the other side of it, if you're always online and you feel like you only have friends online, that doesn't translate to your real life, because you obviously want people to be there for you and you want to have those connections in real life where you can call somebody and go and meet at a cafe or restaurant, do something together. So, yes, for nuance and niche groups, it's important, but I would say use it to your advantage to create a real life connection. There's got to be someone in that virtual group in the same city as you, or multiple people in the same city as you. Use that to take initiative and do something in real life.
Yeah, I love that. I think before we get into what we actually see is working or what loneliness has done to benefit the generation, I want to pose a question and maybe spend some time talking about whether we think loneliness is a personal or a societal failure. And the reason I say that is part of the research into this episode. I found that actually Japan has a minister for loneliness. And that's how seriously they take it as a mental health crisis. One of the other stats I found was that mental health and like loneliness in specific is as comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So the physical detriments of smoking 15 cigarettes a day is the same in what loneliness does to us. So should it be within our policies? Should we as a country be pushing to see ads on this? We see ads on TV all the time about smoking now, about vaping, cancer, etc., sunscreen even. Should we now be putting, I'm sure there's money and research going into mental health, but what are we doing to actually advertise this and make people feel like we are doing something to push it and help benefit the generation? there's things like cost of living, like we talked about at the start. We can't afford to go out anymore. So, what is the country doing to help us as a generation be able to communicate and be able to socialize? So, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on whether you think that as a country we need to be doing something to support the overall group, because it's obvious it's not affecting the bare minimum, but more the majority of us.
Yeah, I do. And this may be more of a controversial take, but I feel like the ownership needs to become on the individual. Like, we can't look at the government and say, what is the government doing to help me? Because that's a victim mentality. You know, you need to have a hero mentality where you're proactively trying to tackle the situation that works for you. So, cost of living is definitely something that's probably correlated to the frequency of people meeting in real life, but there are cheap or free options to socialize. It can just be something as simple as you both make your own coffee or whatever beverage you want, and you meet at a place and go for a walk, or you meet at someone's house and play card games. So, for example, for New Year's Eve, me, my partner, and our two good friends in Brisbane caught up. We had a barbecue and we played card games, and it was some of the best night I've had in a long time because you're laughing, you're just socializing. It costs nothing, just a little bit of food, you know. So
Yeah, I love that. I
eh,
think it's so easy to say, oh, but we can't afford it. What are we doing that's free? I do think that there is some sort of emphasis if we are comparing it to things like smoking, where how do we get the government to step in to help communicate and inform people that it is an epidemic almost, and what are we going to do to help it? I
mm,
think there's things that it's so, and even health professionals, right? We go to them and we say we're depressed or we've got social anxiety as a result of loneliness. And the first thing they do, instead of saying, all right, let's talk through it, let's go through what the anchors are in it, it's here, go on this medication. And also not even saying when how long they should be on it for. Just this is your band-aid, let's go on this. I did hear that there was this new thing called social prescribing, where you actually go on this and like the comparative thing is maybe a mental health plan with a psychologist, and it's basically a plan where you tell them what your hobbies are and what you like. So for example, if it was art, they'd prescribe you with three sorts of activities or forums or community groups that you can actually go
mm.
to 3 times a week. They might say is your frequency, it might be 2 times a week, whatever it is, and they put you on this plan to actually help you go back into the world and alleviate some of these loneliness effects, which I think is really, really awesome. But I just don't think that there's enough communication that those avenues are available for us. Because to
Mm.
your point, yes, we can do it for free, and yes, it's up to the individual. But sometimes we need a little bit of a push, and we sometimes need to pay someone for that accountability and to help us. Because as we know, when you get down this really heavy mental health road, you sometimes feel like you're alone and there isn't any help, and you almost do need someone to help pull you out. I think for me, I would love to see a little bit more emphasis on it, whether that's through advertising, whether that's through communication, and whether that's through our health professionals. When someone does come to you, it's not just here, take these pills. It's all right, let's talk through it. Let's see where this stemmed from. Are you based on COVID? Are you saying it through that? Has there been something traumatic that's happened in your friendship group or in growing up? What actually is the crux of it all before we start going, just take some pills?
Yeah, well, I guess that's part of the reasons why we started this podcast, right? Because we wanted to give real conversations real space, and then in that it drives awareness. So when you're talking about the prescribing of activities, I didn't even know that existed. So for those people who may need that, it's really good to hear you talk about it because it allows them to have that outlet and
Yeah.
actually go and say, okay, I'm struggling. This is the support that I might need to get. Through getting this support, it might give me the outcome where I can actually go and maybe feel a little bit of encouragement to participate in an activity or some sort of group that they never thought, some group that they didn't even know existed. So hopefully, as we continue doing this podcast, we want to build an audience where people can feel like they a learn something, and b feel more connected to the world around them, and C, feel more connected to themselves. And obviously, we want this podcast to grow with you, our listener. So, really
Yeah.
keen to hear how you're feeling about what we're talking about and share your own experience with us. Do you relate to any of the stories Megan and I have shared with you today? Do you have a story of your own that you feel like might help someone else? And if you do, let us know on social media or wherever you're listening to this podcast. So, Megan, I'll pass it over to you if you want to do some, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is, we've spent some time talking about how bad loneliness is and how it's become an epidemic and the negatives of it, which it totally is. And I think let's get under the hood and it's good to have this conversation. But what's actually working, right? So, something that we do see is there's an influx in run clubs, higher ups, health fitness, open fitness groups. You even talked to your experience on boxing and all of
Mm,
that. So, let's turn to these avenues. I guess a positive is maybe Gen Z are focused more on fitness. Maybe they are focused on moderation. Some of the stats I've seen is that they're not drinking anymore. Before, there was these social pressures of having to drink alcohol to socialize and alleviate a bit of this social anxiety. But there's actually a decline in how much they're drinking. So, lean into these avenues. There's hobbification that's being a big thing. So, things like pottery, art, knitting, lean into those networks. Book clubs, there's a rise of
mm.
that. There is going to definitely be something within your community. And if not, online, contrary to what we say, is always an opportunity to go to. And I think the last thing is Gen Z are the most open to therapy and talking about how they feel. So let's not forget about, although we're going through this, what it's actually done for us in good. And I guess to summarize, will it ever get better? Who knows? I think that is up to us as an individual. What we do try and people decline us, keep going. Sit in that vulnerability, sit in rejection. You're almost so many more steps closer to getting that, right? And I think we both would love to leave the listener with a challenge and say to them, you're not alone in this loneliness epidemic. So turn to the person next to you on the train, at the gym, at the shops. And all it is you don't have to start this 10-minute conversation about life. You just have to make a couple comments and say, hi, how are you? On your walks that everyone's going on. Just turn to the next person because I think for us, the loneliness epidemic is only going to change if we start making that action.
Yeah, that's right. Be present in the moment. That's actually something I adopted. So the other day I went for a walk and there was this lady at the lights and the lights were taking so long. And I just made a comment and I turned to her and I said, "These lights take forever and I'm sweating so much. It was so hot." And she goes, "Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it?" And she then said, "How are you today?" Bang, instant, just a nice, "How are you?" "Yeah, I'm good. How are you?" "Yeah, I'm about to go to the shops and get a couple of things." Okay, that's nice. It's small, but it's a human interaction that I don't think we have that much these days. So, my final statement is just welcome and accept every situation that you're in and stay present in the moment. Keep showing up, and eventually things will work out for you, no matter the outcome you're trying to achieve or hope to desire.